Posami questa gamba in sulla spalla e levami dal c***o anco la mano. E quando vuoi ch'io spinga forte o piano, piano o forte col c***o sul letto balla.
Many of us, it's shocking to realize this unbroken chain that connects each and every human being all the way back to the very beginning of life itself. Of course, we know exactly what making a child involves, yet imagining too vividly what you are living evidence of might already make you somewhat uncomfortable, and with your grandparents in mind, things begin to seem implausible. So, looking back through the generations, we must eventually come to the conclusion that in the year 1527, actual sex wasn't really a thing yet, when the celebrated Pietro Arentino wrote poetry like
La man dal c***o non levarò io, non io, che non vo far questa pazzia. E se non vuoi così, vatti con Dio.
Just like on YouTube today, the 1500s had some things you just couldn't really show. And so this is all that's left of the book these poems were originally written for. Only one pirated copy survived in full, a cheap reproduction of prints now lost. The rest destroyed by order of Pope Clement himself and the artist imprisoned. Marcantonio Raimondi owed his quick release to the political influence of his friend Arentino and his fascination for the engravings. For each he would compose an accompanying sonnet to be printed under the title of I Modi, the 16 modes. At this point, a number of death threats and a failed assassination attempt had already forced Arentino to leave Rome for a city to safely publish from. When he eventually settled in what he himself called the seat of all vices and began work on I Modi, the Venetian scholar Pietro Aron had incidentally just published his theory on the 8 musical modes, a newly developed approach to explaining polyphony with a system originally devised for plain chant. What distinguishes these modes is not so much the pitches they use. In fact, they all take place on the same relative scale called gamut, as it begins on the note G, gamma ut. The focus instead lies on the placement of the so-called final, a kind of tonal vanishing point all melodic lines in a composition are perceived in relation to. Aaron attempts to categorize how each possible placement of the final influences what he calls the affects of the soul. So, for relieving anxiety, for example, he recommends placing the final on the note F. In contrast, having the lines converge on the note E is supposed to provoke animosity and even anger. The Greek philosopher Aristotle had first formulated the thought that is being expanded upon here. Considering how little was really known about the music of ancient Greece, this classification mostly just expresses the general obsession the Renaissance had with antiquity. Aaron even takes it as far as trying to explain the differences between the modes by means of some vague ethnographical concept. A final on F is defined by having major intervals above it, and as the Lydians apparently were described to have been of a hard and sharp temperament, Aaron calls that mode Lydian. In contrast, placing the final on E results in minor intervals, and the mode is called Phrygian because of the supposedly soft and placid character of that people. And as a final on D combines properties of the other two, the Dorian mode is considered flexible in how it influences these affects of the soul. The modes of Marcantonio Raimondi participate in this obsession for antiquity as well, invoking mythological characters and references to history. There seems to be more to this than simple pornography. What really prompted the harsh censorship was how printing these engravings suddenly made them available to the general public. Meanwhile, palaces were brimming with lascivious depictions, some of them explicitly so, like in the frescoes of Giulio Romano that also inspired Raimondi. The status of their owners shielded such pictures from censorship long enough for them to eventually be hung in places where today's children are taken by their grandparents to learn about high art. Still, in public museums, we are not seldom confronted with this emperor's new clothes scenario, where well-behaved visitors awkwardly pretend to unsee what some of the paintings may or may not suggest. This was certainly a thing in Raimondi's time as well, so his punchline is also about subverting that game, working with his usual artistic refinement, except to actually show people straight up f***ing for real this time. Likewise, Arentino subverts the Petrarchan sonnet by not even buying into its complex way of playing with unfulfilled desire, the key point of courtly love with its strict conventions and rules. If there's a rule governing the 16 sonnets of Imoli, it's that each one has to present a new arrangement of the same 3 words.
Because pussies get fucked by dicks, but dicks also fuck assholes, Chuck.
E dalla il cazzo falla, di ch'io sia un forfante e un villano, perch'io conosco dalla vulva l'ano, come un cavallo conosce una cavalla.
From a purely artistic perspective, the limitation of always having to show the lovers deep into their act also meant a new challenge for Raimondi, whose entire craft was mostly about drawing human figures in various configurations anyway. In an academical book on painting, incidentally even named after Arentino, he himself explains a painting to be as cold as a dead body if its figures don't manage to move the affects of the beholder's soul. In the visual language, Raimondi and his generation adapted from the manner of preceding artists, human anatomy is what language is to Arentino or the gamut to Aaron. Rules govern how all the parts fit together, and the artist's essential task is to rearrange the same handful of elements in ever-changing modes, ultimately with the intention of affecting the soul.
Sicché, f***ti a buon modo o vanne via.
In a letter the Venetian organist Marcantonio Cavazzoni had received just in the year before, his colleague Pietro Aaron is mentioned to have brought a theoretical problem they were wondering about before one of his own friends, the musician Marco dall'Aquila. Admiringly, the poet Arentino would later compare Marco's lute playing to the mastery of another friend of his, the painter Titian. The highest compliment an artist could have wished for, yet the lutenist's way of working was more akin to the process of a Marcantonio Raimondi. Like him, he spent the majority of his time arranging the works of other artists, mostly the new style of French song that had recently become the next big thing in northern Italy. Taken at face value, this song seems to describe a harmless scene, just tame and jolly medieval fun in an innocent time long before people even knew what dirty talk was, which has made it an early music favorite in choirs today. but even just a short look into the circle of French King Francis I, where this was composed, quickly reveals these people wouldn't really have bothered with singing about actual birds, something that Marco dall'Aquila was no less in on than his infamous friend Arentino. The fallacy behind imagining a sexless past has a dangerous aspect. It leads us to believe that these people were somehow not all the way alive like we are today, more like little mannequins in a storybook than fully featured human beings capable of genuine emotion, self-reflection or conscious subversion. To imagine the people of old as old-fashioned, as old people tend to be in our experience, makes it nigh impossible interpreting the past in a way that actually helps us with our present. And of course, this problem also extends to interpreting music, especially when it comes to singing.
In the background to this madrigal, we hear some chickens clucking around their feet. Or is that the women themselves?
But instruments are affected by this as well. A number of established lute players from the 20th century keep on feeding the stereotype of relaxing music to study and fall asleep to, with soft and peaceful sounds, introverted, a little bookish, and too shy to ever suggest anything offensive. In short, something to make the grandparents proud. But if the poetry of a Pietro Arentino or the art of a Marc Antonio Raimondi are something these players would rather have hidden from their own elders, why even play the music of someone like Marco dall'Aquila like a good boy?
Io non me ne anderia, signora cara, da così dolce ciancia, se ben credes Campari il re di Francia.
Memo usually ends with a music video, but this episode is an exception, as I recorded a whole CD to go along with the video, available starting today. So if you'd like to hear more of what you already heard in the background of this episode, or if you'd like to find out more about Marco dall'Aquila and all the people surrounding him in Venice, you can find Bella Incognita on Amazon or on iTunes or any other record store. Or you could of course also have a listen on Spotify or any other streaming service, but that way you will also be missing out on the booklet, which includes another essay, additional artwork, and a little dedication to all the people that have been making this project Memo, as well as the production of the CD, possible in the first place. And by that I of course mean the patrons of Memo. The way this works is that there's a website called patreon.com where Memo has its own page, and there you can sign up to become a patron. This means choosing a small amount, something like $2 or price for a cup of coffee in your home country, and whenever I release another episode of Memo, this amount is then automatically donated to the project, and together all these micro donations form something like a salary for all the work and time and effort that goes into each of these videos, in turn enabling me to make more of them in the future. So this is my moment to extend my sincere gratitude to all the people that have been supporting Memo all these months, as well as those who might be joining them in the future. Another big thank you goes out to Memo's first sponsor, which is the online string service cuerdaspulsadas.com, where you can find all kinds of strings, not only for lutes, but virtually any stringed instrument. If you'd like to find out more about Memo or the new CD, Bella Incognita, you can find more information on Memo's own website, which is musicamemo.com. And there you can also sign up to Memo's newsletter, which will inform you whenever I release another episode. So I guess the only thing really left to say at this point is that I hope you enjoyed this episode and that you'll perhaps also be enjoying the new CD and that you'll be joining me for the upcoming installment of Memo.